There's been a lot of controversy surrounding Kris Jenner's facelift, and there really shouldn't be because she looks amazing. She had a great result. So Kris Jenner, many years ago, had a facelift. I'm not sure if that was her first or second or third, but for sure she had one about 15 years prior to this latest one. And the latest one has been applauded. It was all the rage after Paris Fashion Week when Kris Jenner came out and looked absolutely amazing. People are saying she looked like she's in her 30s. Now, this is a woman that just celebrated her 70th birthday. Now, I applaud her surgeon, Dr. Stephen Levine. Dr. Levine did a beautiful job, and as soon as this came out, people were talking about it being, oh, well, she had a deep plane facelift. Look how great she looks. So why deep plane? Well, deep plane has been all the rage throughout social media. All you hear about is deep plane. Every patient I see that comes for a facelift, they ask about deep plane facelifts. And it's a good technique. It is not the only technique. It is not even necessarily the best technique, and it's certainly not the best technique for everybody. Now, the thing is, Dr. Levine is not known for doing deep plane facelifts. He does a more superficial SMAS technique, not into the deep plane. Just to be clear, we're picking nits here. We're looking at different levels of tissue that are about, at best, a 1/4 inch thick. So it's really, really thin layers of tissue that we're talking about. So when you do a facelift, you have to raise the skin up to a certain degree. And that's true of even the deep plane. The skin has to be separated in some way. So you do that to a certain length. And then after you get to a certain length, you start getting into the deeper planes if you're doing a deeper plane facelift. Now, the SMAS sits on top of the muscle, and so there's this SMAS fibrofatty layer sitting on top of the muscle. Then there's the muscles of the face, and then you get down to the bone. She didn't have the deep plane. She had a more superficial SMAS technique done by Dr. Levine and looked fabulous. Recently, there was a story in Radar Online that was alleging, based on unnamed third-party sources, saying that she's now pissed that things are slipping and it's not as good as it was a year ago, and she's unhappy. Now, this is not corroborated. She has not said anything but positive things in public about Dr. Levine, about her results, and she still looks great. Jolene Edgar, fantastic writer that covers our world in beauty and aesthetics, did a great summary of this, really looked at it and broke it down better than I can do on this video. But she looked at this specifically, and you can see a photo from right after her facelift in May of 2025, and then it posts another photo of March, like a few weeks ago, that it was taken in another event where it's not as airbrushed and touched up and filtered and all that. And either way, she looks great. So the idea that it's slipping is kind of silly. So why would there be all this controversy about Kris Jenner's facelift, and why would anyone want to allege that it's slipping? For some reason, there's a lot of ego involved, there's a lot of opinion involved, and people kind of planting their flag on team deep plane and team SMAS and fighting it out like one has to be better than the other and who's going to win. So let's look at the deep plane and the SMAS controversy. There's a very famous study that all plastic surgeons are familiar with, facial plastic surgeons, we're all familiar with this study. It's called the twins study. And this was done a long time ago by the master, the inventor of the deep plane facelift. Now, there were 4 surgeons that operated on 2 sets of twins. Each twin had a facelift done by 1 surgeon, and each pair of twins were paired with 1 superficial technique and 1 deep plane technique surgeon. And these are masters. All 4 surgeons were masters of the technique. The twins were operated upon the same day, each set of twins. And they looked at the before and after, but the afters were taken at 1 year, at 5 years, and 10 years. And then they published this grand finale study looking at it after the 10-year follow-up. And all 4 surgeons, plus the moderator, came out and said, hey, you know what? Neither one of these techniques lasted longer than the other. They both look equally good at 1 year, at 5 years, and 10 years. It doesn't seem to be any advantage. You couldn't tell me which patient had the deep plane and which patient had the more superficial technique. They both looked good. There's another surgeon that did at least one case, and he may have done others, one case where he did a split face. One side was done with a more superficial technique, one side was done with a deeper plane technique. And you cannot look at the patient afterwards and tell me which side was which. And that patient is aging evenly, everything looks good. So The notion that these things last longer doesn't pan out. Now, about a month ago, or 2 months ago, in February, Mark Levin and Andrew Frankel published a retrospective study looking back at the duration when people came back for reoperation, looking at all the trends of hundreds and hundreds, over 1,000 facelifts, and looking at deep plane versus more superficial technique, and actually specifically a deep plane, and looking at the results and how long they last. And they concluded that the deep plane seems to last about 11 years, 10.9 years I think was the number. Now, when you look at just facelifts in general, all facelifts, all types, seem to last about 10, 11 years. And so it's about the same duration of time. It doesn't seem to be a big difference between the deep plane and the more superficial techniques. Now, I will say that there are patients that do better with deep plane facelifts. The issues with their anatomy are going to favor getting into that deeper plane, moving this area a little bit more aggressively, keeping the skin connected. There's an advantage there because there's less of a chance for bleeding in that area, more superficial bleeding like a hematoma, but there is more risk, and most people don't talk about that. There is risk of nerve damage with a deep plane that you simply don't have with a more superficial technique. In the end, summarizing all this, who cares about Kris Jenner's facelift? She looks great. Let her live her best life. Number two, Dr. Levine, he did a more superficial SMAS technique, and he did a masterful job. She looks fantastic, and his patients do very well. He deserves all the praise he gets. Number three, don't get hung up on a particular technique. You can do deep plane, you can do superficial. It's really up to what the surgeon feels he or she is going to give you the best result, and what he or she is most comfortable doing to give you that best result. Number four, don't believe everything you see in social media, because Kris Jenner is apparently still very happy and should be with her results. Don't get caught up in whatever fad there is, because thinking it must be what you have to have. There's a spectrum. Trust your surgeon. He or she has your best interest in mind and has the talent and the skills to get you where you want to be. And that's the summary of Kris Jenner and her facelift, and a little bit of a primer on deep plane versus superficial. I hope that helps.